4 officers involved in Floyd's death are fired the next day. Demonstrators gather at the site of the incident in what becomes the first night of protests in Minneapolis. Protests against police brutality erupt right across the United States, including in Los Angeles and Memphis. The death of Breonna Taylor, a medical worker killed in her own home in Louisville in March 2020, also gains prominence. The officer who knelt on Floyd's neck, Derek Chauvin, is charged 2 days later. On June 3rd, new charges are filed. The other 3 officers who were present when George Floyd died are charged with aiding and abetting the killing. Speaking in the last few hours, George Floyd's brother, Philanese, and the family's lawyer, Benjamin Crump, said how they were preparing for court.
We just prayed a lot because we're a praying family. We talked about what we know they're trying to do. They're going to try to assassinate his character. So I'll be in there, and George, he will be with me, and my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, will be with me also.
This murder case is not hard. You just look at that torture video of George Floyd. Had George Floyd been a white American citizen, nobody would be saying this is a hard, difficult case.
Our North America correspondent Gary O'Donoghue joins us from outside court. Gary, what should we be watching for in this trial then?
Well, it's going to be a huge trial. I mean, it's a really momentous moment, not just in the American legal system, but really for America more generally, and America's complicated battle with race and racism down the generations. We'll get those opening statements today from both sides. We'll see the jury, of course, enter into the court and take their seats for what promises to be about a month of evidence from both sides before they make a decision. Let me bring in someone who has a good lot of experience of the system here in Minneapolis. John Lesch has been a prosecutor for 15 years, now a defense attorney. What is this trial going to turn on, John?
Gary, for the prosecution, this is going to be about that video, the video of showing George Floyd dying under the knee of Derek Chauvin. For the defense, they're going to be looking at the medical examiner's report and whether there were contributory factors of why he died.
Now, there's 2 murder charges and a manslaughter charge. What do they have to show?
They have to show that Derek Chauvin unintentionally murdered George Floyd by his actions with the second-degree unintentional murder. And for the third-degree murder charge, they have to show depraved mind, that it was unintentional, but that there was a depraved mind. There's less of a burden to show the third-degree charge. It's easier to show that.
And that was the charge that was added in later on, right at the end of the process, wasn't it?
That's correct. It was added in originally and then dismissed, and the judge let it back in. Yep.
So in other words, the prosecution don't have to show that Derek Chauvin intended to kill George Floyd.
That's correct. Either for the second-degree charge, count 1, or for the third-degree charge, count 2. The second-degree charge is called felony murder, meaning just by action of assaulting George Floyd and it killed him, can they prove that he murdered him?
Now, the defense obviously are going to talk a little bit about George Floyd's history, his drug taking. There were drugs found in his body. Is that going to be a big factor for them?
The defense was precluded from introducing past evidence of George Floyd's drug use by the motions from the state. But they can show current use, that there was a pill in his mouth, that there was foam around his mouth, that he was acting in a way that showed that he was impaired. And they will focus heavily on that.
Now, a lot of focus, of course, on the jury and the makeup of the jury. It's quite an unusual jury, isn't it, in Minnesota, this one?
It's very unusual. It's far more diverse, far diverse for Minnesota, and then also for Hennepin County. It's also unusual to the extent that nearly every single one of these jurors has seen the video, and they have an opinion about the case already. That's very rare.
It's quite extraordinary, actually, one of them hasn't.
That's right, yeah, that's right. To like, where have you been for the past year is the question.
Now, look, everyone around the world is looking at this trial. Everyone around the world is seeing this through the lens of race and racism, and America's grappling with the race issue. But will race be a part of it for either side? Is it in either side's interest to make race a part of it?
Absolutely. There's no question that there's no way you cannot make this trial about race. The 2 major cases that this will be looked at through the lens of in Minnesota both had to do with race. Recent cases where one officer was acquitted and one officer was convicted of third-degree murder, those both dealt with race. This will deal with race as well.
Okay, John Lesch, thanks for joining us on BBC News this morning. This is going to unfold for the next few weeks, really. We're expecting maybe a 4-week trial or so, and America is holding its breath because the outcome could have enormous consequences for for the state of the nation and in terms of law and order here in Minneapolis. Back to you in the studio.
Gary, many thanks.